Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlinson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Hi, I'm Amy Rowlinson and I am thrilled that the podcast is now live. Actually, I can't believe it. It went straight into the business podcast charts at number 4, featured in the new shows and top shows on iTunes for business and education categories. And my podcast was there sitting amongst some seriously experienced podcasts. Those from Tim Ferriss, Tony Robbins, Rachel Hollis, Gary Vee, Rob Moore, Jay Shetty, David Goggins, David Walliams. It's just all so surreal, to be honest. And, well, to be fair, everything in the world right now is a bit surreal. But going back just 1 month ago, I remember waking up and my subconscious mind had been working on the concept of the new podcast. I knew I wanted to do one. I didn't know what it was going to be, but my mind woke me up. It pulled me out of my slumber to let me know of this fantastic idea that I'd had whilst I was resting. What a wonderful thing our mind is. So here we are now in episode 7. And already you've heard some wonderful conversations which I've had with some truly incredible people. And what I wanted to do is share some of my reflections and observations from these recent episodes in a series that I will call simply Reflections and Observations. So firstly, I want to thank Atgar again for that really unexpected phone call that I had just a few days after the idea for this podcast was made public. She called me to say, Amy, I've got a feeling that you may need to do your first episode differently to how I think you may have planned it out. I was curious. What was her plan? And she said to me, I love how committed you are to what you're doing. And I really believe that I can help you to articulate your first message in that first episode for your podcast. And her proposal, as you will now know if you've listened to episode 1, was that she was going to turn the tables on me, allowing me to really explain what the podcast was about from a different perspective, from the perspective, I guess, from my heart. And I felt that that would be really congruent with the message that I wanted to deliver, in the sense that this podcast was created for others and talking about their whys. Listening back to the podcast episode, it wasn't perfect. The Zoom call was a bit glitchy, but I felt it was important that we put it out. That episode was an episode that came from the heart. We recorded it live. It caught me by surprise. And I've just been so inspired by so many people over the last 4 years. And I wanted to return the favour. I had a way of doing just that. And this podcast was all about inspiring others to take action. Seeing people recognise their own potential, seeing people achieve what they thought was possible is the most incredible feeling. So thank you again, Atgar. It was a lovely gesture. And I'm very grateful as I got to be the first guest on my own podcast. Although officially, my first guest was Adrian Brown. Adrian was one of the first people that I met on a property course back in 2016. We stayed in touch ever since with himself and his wife, Wendy. And they actually approached me in March 2018 and said, would I be interested in coming to speak at an event for them on the 2nd of May? So we're going back 2 years now. And that was to be the first of many public speaking events to come, although I didn't know that at the time. So when I came up with the concept for this new podcast, I knew that Adrian had to be the first person that I reached out. Tip my hat to him and Wendy for saying thank you for helping me on my journey and firmly and kindly pulling me out of my comfort zone at the time. I remember driving back from speaking at that first event and I was absolutely buzzing from the adrenaline, having spoken in front of 30 people. Weirdly, I had really enjoyed it. I didn't think I would, but I really did. And I felt that message that I had was important, that it was never too late to be what you might have been, and that I wasn't anyone special, but yet I'd achieved great things. So I wanted to show others that they could do the same too. I could bring passion to the occasion because the reason I was talking that day was I was sharing my why about why I'd done what I'd done in property. I was telling my personal investment story and explaining why it was important for me to have started in property. And that was why I was able to stand up without even worrying about it and speak to people. Okay, I guess I am lying a bit. I had sweaty palms. My hands shook at the start and I was a bit wobbly and I could hear my voice going a bit funny. But very quickly, I relaxed. I stood there at the front smiling at everybody because I knew inside that someone in the audience may be inspired to take action from one of the slides that I presented, seeing my journey and maybe taking the action to do something for their own lives, for their own self. And I felt really empowered by that. Listening back to Adrian's podcast, I was fascinated by one of the comments he made about us being past-based creatures and how we resist change, how we take great comfort in what is comfortable and what we like and what we know. I think, again, standing up in front of that audience that time really pushed me out of my comfort zone, and actually that felt good. So when Adrian was talking about how we can invent a future and uninvent the past, I took some key messages from that. As we've had our world blown apart right now, our current lifestyle, our thinking, our mindset, it's not the way that we are comfortable with. We don't quite know how to react, and we can't carry on thinking in the same way that we've done in the past. And Adrian used a really good metaphor, which is very poignant, about how we think we're playing tennis, but in fact, after hitting the ball, it doesn't come back as a tennis ball, it's coming back as an arrow. The game is switched to archery. We have to think about everything differently now. Business has changed, the game has changed, and that was really poignant for me to hear that when reflecting on Adrian's podcast. The next podcast was Jo Akhgar. Now, anyone who knows Jo, and if anybody has spent any time with Jo, you'll know exactly what I mean when I say that she is a human battery charger. She charges you up with energy. She physically exudes energy. You can't help but smile or giggle when you're in her company. What a wonderful gift that is. What a wonderful gift she has. And it's no coincidence that her favourite word in the English language is passion. And I know why. She is so passionate about life and living a life of fulfillment. Her purpose is such that she directs all this passionate energy into teaching, helping others to achieve in whatever sense that may be, in whatever they want to achieve. Her message of now is your time is a powerful one. And I'm a strong believer. As I said, it's never too late to be what you might have been. I'm a midlife beginner, and I highly advocate that if you truly believe in something, you should work towards achieving it, because if it's your passion, then you will achieve it. Just look at what I've done with this podcast. I wanted to do it and I've got it out there. So I agree, Jo. Now is your time to find fulfillment. And thank you, Jo, for all that you do for people. I love having you standing alongside me, and I'm so grateful for your support and love. So carry on doing what you're doing. Physically charge people's batteries, because that is what you're here to do on this planet. I truly believe that. Moving on to Steve Judge's podcast. Well, wheelchair to world champion says it all. What a story. I first met Steve on a Zoom call back in early April this year in a breakout room where we had to discuss our favourite non-fiction book and also our most hated non-fiction book. Well, neither of us could actually think of our most hated non-fiction book. We're avid readers and we pretty much take something from every book we read. But we both agreed on the same favourite book, which was The Miracle Morning by Elrod. We talked about our morning routines and the habits that we had adopted and how they were really quite similar, which was great. We resonated with one another. And it was only in a phone call afterwards where we were talking that I actually heard about Steve's journey. I had no idea. His story is so similar to Hal's. Both of them had had horrendous car crashes where they'd almost died and had to physically rebuild themselves again, both then going on to achieving incredible feats. And it was only on that follow-up call that Steve shared with his story with me, and I knew straight away that he had to come on the podcast to share his energy, his determination, his grit, his passion for how he's now helping other people to change their lives in a way that he was able to rebuild his. Steve talked on the podcast about having no excuses, and that's something I really want to pick up on. That when faced with defeat and failure, it's often easier to give up than battle against the adversity you face. And often this is what the majority of people do. They give up. But Steve's story in showing that he was so determined to get back on his feet was a powerful one. I just wanted to reflect on that because we do give up on things sometimes because they are hard. But if we'd kept going, if we'd pushed through, we would have achieved wonderful things. So keep going, keep pushing through, because you can achieve wonderful things. And it's something that Jim Rohn said, that if you really want to do something, you'll find a way. And I believe that. And he goes on to say, if you don't, you'll find an excuse. And I believe that too, that if something is really, truly important to you, you will do it. You will do whatever is possible to make that happen. It reminds me of the wonderful late Tony Buzan, who wrote in his book Headstrong, that the brain is a success mechanism and it learns with every trial. He uses a system called TEFCAS, which is brilliant in a sense that you can train the brain to receive information in a different way. If you train your brain to process the effort you make, no matter what you do, your brain's aim is to succeed in doing it, so you're learning with every try. Are you designing your brain for success? Now, Einstein is attributed to have said, the person who never made a mistake never tried anything new. Well, absolutely. I recognise that the conscious and the subconscious mind need to be in alignment to achieve your goals. The subconscious mind works day and night for the conscious mind, and it needs to focus on your why. This is why my subconscious mind was so working on overdrive, because it knew that my conscious mind was trying to think of something. And that's how my Focus on Why podcast arose. My subconscious mind was simply working towards the goal that I was looking for. So you really need to be mindful of what task your conscious mind is setting the subconscious mind, and the importance of the positive emotions that dominate the mind should not be underestimated. One single negative emotion is enough to sabotage all chances of any constructive assistance from the subconscious mind. It really is mind over matter. The conscious mind commands and the subconscious mind obeys. So ensure that your conscious mind knows what your purpose and your plan are, so the subconscious mind can get to work to achieve them. And don't underestimate what you need to do to create that new life. The secret to overnight success in business or in a personal life can take many years of hard work, and it takes time to create something great. Steve said it. It's not easy. It's hard work. And James Clear said in his book, Atomic Habits, focusing on your habits is far more important than worrying about your outcomes. And it is so true. You really need to think about what it is you're doing on a daily basis, because your habits become you. Quitter never wins and a winner never quits. And Jim Rohn said, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. And I think they're really important points to think about here. Moving on to the next podcast, it was Sam Rathling and her butterfly. So not only did Sam share her incredible mission for her clients to generate £1 billion, which is awesome, she shared a beautiful butterfly analogy, which for me covered many different concepts all at one time. She described the 4 phases of business and likened them to the stages of the butterfly, from egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to butterfly. And what a great way to see how important each stage of business is, and how each one should be carefully nurtured to ensure that the end result is one where you emerge as simply the best version of yourself into that beautiful butterfly. And what I particularly love is that Sam brought together nature with business into one conversation, how we can draw inspiration from the world around us, from the simple things, from butterfly wings. I mean, just so beautiful and incredible. Slowing down and noticing what is around us, drawing inspiration from the world around us, seeing the wonderful journeys that people are on, the growth that is possible if we feed ourselves with the right food, that we are prepared to work hard to achieve what it is that we desire, that we should also take time to recognise our own gifts that we have to offer others. As Sam reminded us, we can't see our own wings in the same way a butterfly can't, and it's so true that we often get caught up in the melee of life and forget just how brilliant and gifted we are. We can't see our own wings. Going back to Adrian's words, perhaps we should stop, pause, breathe, check out our wings, be grateful for them, appreciate that we're alive, focus on our why, and then continue. It serves as a strong reminder to first recognise that we have our beautiful wings, and we need to check them regularly and remind ourselves of how in sharing and appreciating their beauty, we can actually help others. I will be reminding people of how beautiful their wings are, and also to remember to appreciate my own. Is there someone out there today that you could say, wow, your wings are awesome? Moving on to Davide, what a great storyteller he is. The beautiful, rich language, the analogies, the metaphors he used to illustrate his why, and his retelling of the good thing, bad thing, who knows story. I could hear him tell that story 100 times. It's so beautiful. It struck me just how important that not labelling events can be in our life. How allowing those immediate emotions to dictate our actions can take us on a roller coaster into a chain of events. Instead, just waiting. Maybe losing that stallion today is not the disaster that you think it is, and tomorrow it could actually be a gift. And the lighthouse metaphor, well, I've been thinking about that ever since. How a lighthouse sits in what may appear calm waters, and yet there are hidden dangers just lurking beneath the water. How a lighthouse's purpose is a navigational aid that helps guide maritime pilots out at sea to steer clear from those dangerous rocks and dangerous coastlines, using that powerful light to guide them. And the metaphor of the lighthouse, how it shines that across the waters and shows you the way. Oh, I loved it. It was brilliant. And then we had the glass of water, which sometimes we need to empty out to help others, to give it to others. And it reminded me that we often talk about a glass, which is it half empty or is it half full? And it's actually neither half full nor half empty. It's simply just ready for us to pour more water in to receive more learning, and that our journey is never over. We just constantly pour water out and replenish it. It just reminds me that there's so much more to life, and that we should be living the radiant one that Davide describes, taking responsibility for our actions, living a life that is congruent to our values. And what I realise is that people are drawn to the simple elements of our existence and the basic questions that we are asking ourselves. The core values that we hold are really important. And what I've come to realise is that people are drawn to the simple elements of our existence, those basic questions that we ask ourselves. And that people want a forum to express their experiences, their knowledge, and in some cases their soul. And this podcast for me has allowed people to share their journeys, to share their stories, to share what it is they are giving to the world, to encourage people to engage with one another. And I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who's messaged me with praise for this new podcast. I am truly grateful to have had so many people reach out to me. I have received so many incredible messages in the last few days. My happiness pot is simply overflowing. Tears of joy have actually rolled down my cheeks regularly as I read them. I believe that gratitude is priceless, and you feel so good when praising others, and you feel so good when receiving praise. Valuing others for their actions and feeling valued for your own actions, it works both ways. And it's such a simple act of love which costs nothing and yet has priceless consequences. It's the perfect win-win. So these are simply my reflections and observations, and I'm calling out to you to think about what you have observed, what you have reflected on since listening to any of these stories, and what you may have changed since listening to them. And I'd love you to reach out and share those with me. Thank you for listening to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlinson, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star iTunes review. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook, and become a member of the inspiring, uplifting and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.